Um, if you didn't believe in spontaneous order, you should start believing in it today, because Hannes and I didn't share what we're going to say, and I got it actually maps very well. Though I think that we need to ask him what is his health regime, because his memory is just much better than mine. Or whatever he was drinking at the time in the meetings was much more stimulating than what I was drinking. Among the seven Christian virtues, perhaps the one that theologians have forgotten more is, but to me is one of the most important ones, and it's gratitude. When one has received a lot of what I call many undeserved blessings in life, and I have received very many of those, one must give thanks to the many people who have supported us in doing that, and I'm sure I'm going to remember all of them, because again, I don't think I've followed Hannah's health regime. And unlike, for those who like the opera, unlike Leporello in Don Giovanni, I'm not going to actually list, when he lists all Don Giovanni's conquest, I'm not going to list everybody, and particularly I'm not going to sing. But I cannot continue without at first thanking tonight's sponsors, the Vienna Insurance Group, represented by Peter Thiering here, the Board of Trustees of the Hayek Institute, in particular present tonight, Emily Hierhold, Florian Krenkel, Ursula Schaef, Markus Tomaszitz, and George Vetter. I am also immensely grateful to the woman who makes everything run well and run on time, Brit Scheer. And last but by no means least, I want to thank the president of the Hayek Society and the Austrian Economic Center, Barbara Kolme, who makes all these things possible. It gives me, although it has been done a little bit, it gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce to you tonight a very good friend from Indiana, who defied weather, airlines, bad food in airports and in planes, and made it here to Vienna to be with us tonight. First, Dan Fowler and Colleen Quirk, of course Terry and Caroline Anker, Nate Feldman, and Sean Shelby. I'm forever grateful for your friendship. My wife Isabel, whom I'm sure is been streamed, all of this, my love and my companion of more than 45 years, is back home guarding the home fires, but she also here in one of his more beautiful incarnations, my daughter Inés Pacheco Moss, and her husband Adam Moss. So I accept this award on behalf of Liberty Fund. I accept it on behalf of its present and its past boards of directors, represented here by Terry, by Nate, by Sean, and on behalf of all these colleagues who for more than 32 years have worked with me at Liberty Fund and who have made possible the publication of the books that these awards celebrate. Allow me very briefly take you through down memory lane. Since I received the news of this award, I've been trying to piece together the twisting and very improbable road that takes from Venezuela, from an oil town called Maracaibo, to Vienna tonight. Believe me, it's very improbable and it's very twisting. I grew up there and lived there until I was 25. That was once a stable, promising, prosperous democracy, which has been transformed today in a cruel and abject dictatorship, of which we don't seem to have any hope anymore. In 1979, my wife and I left Venezuela for what we thought would be a very small, short interlude. In England, I was going to pursue a first degree, a master's, and then a doctorate, and then I was going to go back home. Well, that didn't happen that way. In Oxford, in the deep winter of 1980, I met John Gray. You've seen him in photographs. Was then a fellow of Jesus College, and he was writing his book, his monography on Hayek, and who also was supervising two students who were writing their dissertations under him on Hayek. One was Chandran Kukathas. You also saw him, and Hannes. I don't know why or how, but that evening in the Chinese restaurant, I got invited to be there. Unlike Hannes, I don't remember very much about that because I was kind of celebrity struck. He wasn't a Hollywood celebrity struck, but he was an intellectual celebrity for me. Again, it wasn't easy to understand that a young man from Venezuela would be in the presence of Friedrich Hayek. And it's either that or I drank too much Qingdao beer, but in either case, Hannes has actually supplied my memories much better. From that small group that included Hannes and the friends he spoke about, he organized an intellectual dining club named the Hayek Society. But our activities were very modest. We invited scholars to come, give papers, and then we took them to dinner. I don't know again, how he did it, but Hannes wrangled some American money to pay for the dinners at what was called at the time Michel Brasserie in Little Carrington Street. We did that, every so often. We didn't do it every month, but we did enough of that, and that made our lives in Oxford very livable, very companionable. So for that, I'll be forever grateful to. In 1981, as Hannes was saying, Hayek visited Oxford. And then in 85, he came to London to the Ritz. Yet again, Hannes has perfect recollection of what happened. And I still wonder about that because he actually was that evening a little bit more happy and stimulated than he was at the first that time. But after that night, I never saw Hayek again. And the Hayek Society, at least for us, was done. We all went our own ways. I went to the US for a year. Hannes went back to Iceland to teach the university. And each of the others also went to do whatever they wanted to do. I went to the States, started working for an institute called the Institute for Humane Studies. I wanted to do some public choice. I wanted to visit with Jim Buchanan in Fairfax, and I got to know Lena Ligio, Walter Grinder, and a number of other people who, over the years, provided great support in my career and life. In April of 1990, my wife and Isabel, our two daughters, Inés and Isabella, landed in Indianapolis, a very most improbable place for us. I would be lying if I told you that I knew where in the map was Indianapolis. I actually, when the job was broached to me, I asked to look for a map. This is before Google Maps, of course. And they showed me where Indianapolis was, and I said, "Is that the Midwest?" "Yes, it's at the Midwest." So, but that's not even in the middle. Then I was explained what was the origin of that, but it's been 32 years there, and 32 years with Liberty Fund that have been enormously satisfying. I was hired to expand the program of conferences in Indianapolis, in Latin America. Liberty Fund, which again is very improbable. A foundation in Indianapolis decides that they want to have a bilingual program officer to expand conferences, from Mexico onward south. And that's what I came to do. Then things happen, as life does, and my remit expanded to Europe. And I started to do all kinds of things for Liberty Fund too. I have worked in almost every aspect of our educational programs. First, as I say, the conference program, then publishing, then later, starting in 2000, creating or overseeing our online program, wonderful websites, EconLib, the Online Library of Liberty, and Law and Liberty. When I am asked what it is that I do, I remember my mother was always very puzzled about that. I decided to tell her that I was a teacher, that I taught at university, because it was very difficult for her to imagine what it was that I did traveling. Of course, my children thought that I was a spy. And if they didn't believe it, at least their friends believed it. And it was confirmed when I purchased my first German-made piece of luggage, a Rimowa with aluminum. They immediately thought that I was a secret service of some kind. When I'm asked what do I do, my answer is always simple. I'm one of the trustees of Pierre F. Goodrich's legacy. I'm a trustee of his vision and of his mandate of keeping alive this ideal of a society of free and responsible individuals. A few of you may be curious today about Goodrich. Some of you have seen the photograph. In many ways, he's one of the reasons why, or the main reason why we all are gathered here, honoring Hayek, and honoring those who actually have continued the work that Hayek started. In 1960, Mr. Goodrich established the Liberty Fund, and as he wrote in his will and the founding document that governs us, he did that to the end that some helpful contribution may be made to the preservation, restoration, and development of individual liberty through investigation, research, and educational activity. The story of how Mr. Goodrich came to establish the Liberty Fund is worth retelling, even if it's very brief. He was born in the town of Winchester, Randolph County, Indiana. Population at the time, late 19th century, around 3,000 people. Pierre Goodrich was the only son of James P. Goodrich, also from that same small town, governor of the state of Indiana between 1917 and 1921, and the first official envoy that the United States sent to the Soviet Union. Father of our founder met personally Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin. Not only he went once, he went 4 times, sent by the American Relief Administration that was headed at the time by Herbert Hoover. The governor and his 4 brothers had established and grew a family business, including local banks, farms, grain elevators, coal mines, newspapers, public utilities, and a host of other businesses that would be too long to name here. When the governor, his father, passed in 1940, his son Pierre became the leader of the businesses. And over the next 30-plus years, under Pierre's leadership, the Goodrich business prospered and grew, making the family perhaps the largest private fortune in the Midwest. Pierre Goodrich's formal education started in Wabash College, a very small private liberal arts men's college founded in 1832 by a group of graduates from Dartmouth College. Presbyterian, but they were, but they didn't want the college to be a confessional college, and they did it a non-denominational college. From Wabash, Mr. Goodrich went to Harvard Law School, and then his education, as he says in his letters, was interrupted by his service in the military in what he called Mr. Wilson's War. He served in the Army until the war ended. Went back to Indianapolis and served first as a practicing lawyer and then as the leader of the businesses of his family. In looking for a short expression to characterize Pierre Goodrich, I could not find any better one than presenting him to you today as a Socratic businessman, which is actually a very unique combination. He was a practical man, a man of affairs, who never stopped asking himself, what am I? Can I? Ought I? Those three questions are actually sealed in the books of his library at Wabash College, because he thought that you could not be a man of practical bent if you were not all the time asking yourself those three questions. What am I? Can I? Ought I? He knew that the success in the family business was a result of intelligent practice in a society where individuals were both free and responsible for their actions. They could reap rewards, and they could also reap the consequences of bad decisions. That society was what we call the American Republican experiment, established in 1776. Goodrich's whole life and his legacy is in the most literal sense what Socrates called an examined life. When Goodrich created the Liberty Fund in 1960, instead of actually giving his money to a university, he decided to create his own educational institution, and that's Liberty Fund. He wanted to provide the means, and I quote, of relating and combining ideals, experience, and business practice. This is what he writes in his will. He wanted the people, Liberty Fund, to look at how the society works and what it makes it work and how to make it work much better for everybody. Goodrich's time at Harvard Law School, he said, provided him with a starting discipline and a mental process. But his true education just started after his formal studies were finished and when he went on into the world. This continued education was held by, and again I quote him, by his business associates, men and women, by discussions which occurred on arriving at business decisions and business activities. These were the people who created Liberty Fund. Liberty Fund was not created by some academics, scholars in the chair, though Goodrich knew a good group of that, as I will tell you immediately. But it was created by the people who were working with him, who wanted, again, to understand what it was that made their experience what it was. Goodrich's vision for Liberty Fund was inspired by his association with three very important organizations. The Great Books Movement, that was started by Mortimer Adler and President Hutchins from Chicago University. The Foundation for Economic Education, also known as FEE, created by Leonard Read, and by the Mont Pelerin Society. And it was to the Mont Pelerin Society that he met with the scholars who, in my mind, are the ones we are celebrating today. Those included, of course, F.A. Hayek, Wilhelm Röpke, Ben Rogge, John Van Sickle, and Ludwig von Mises. During his lifetime, Mr. Goodrich sponsored 10 Socratic seminars, not very different from the ones that we organize today all over the world. With these conferences, Mr. Goodrich wanted to provide, and I quote, the means for people to come together to discuss the ideas, both in and out of an ordered meeting, with a presiding individual and in the casual discussion of smaller voluntary groups in connection with those meetings. It was Mr. Goodrich's hope, and that's the word that occurs mostly in his writings, it was his hope that such activities will create what you call better thinking. So, what have I done with what have we done with this legacy, and what have we created in doing all of this? I think that the best thing that I can try to list for you is what we have done with the books, with the collection of books. Since 1973, when Mr. Goodrich passed, we have organized, as I say, close to 6,000 of these conferences, these small conferences, and we published about 480 titles. And as the citation that tonight's award says, it is that collection of books which we celebrate, not of one individual that one individual has achieved, but the achievement of the professional and scholars, for the professional staff and the scholars who have contributed to produce that catalog of books. Hannes gave you a little bit of an idea of what we do. I will just complete that. We published the complete works of Adam Smith, the complete works of David Ricardo, the complete works of John Stuart Mill and Frederick Bastiat, the collected works of Ludwig von Mises, 31 volumes of that, the paperback versions of the collected works of F.A. Hayek, the collected works of James Buchanan, the collected works of Gordon Tullock and Israel Kirzner, Henry Manny, and Armand Alkian. If you want to look at what the 20th century has done to an understanding of a free society, I think there are very few other places that you would want to start but coming to our library and seeing our books. We have also brought back in print many of the essential books that are the foundation of this idea that we all cherish so much. Algernon Sidney, John Locke, David Hume, Montesquieu, Tocqueville, Constant, Germain de Staël, François Guizot, Herbert Spencer. We have also published 41 titles in the series Natural Law and Classics of the Enlightenment, and the names include Grotius, Bellarmine, Suarez, Pufendorf, Hutcheson, Lord Kames, Cumberland, Pierre Bayle, Christian Thomasius, Burlamaqui, Emer Vattel, and James McIntosh. My colleagues at Liberty Fund's board and the staff are the custodian of the books, which, with many voices, have asked the hardest questions about what it means to live in a society of free and responsible individuals and what we need to do in order to preserve it and develop it and expand it. We are not the custodians of the answers, nor are we the keepers of a doctrine. Like Mr. Goodrich, the Socratic businessman who created the Liberty Fund, we have nothing that we want to teach, but we know how much we need to learn. The pursuit of this ideal is what we celebrate today, tonight. Thank you. Gracias.